All right, you have officially plateaued in the gym. You're training hard, and all of a sudden, you hit a wall. You don't know how to get over it. Your lifts are staying the same, you're getting weaker potentially, and you have no idea how to hop this wall and keep progressing. What do we do? I have an answer for that. So when we're working out with the goal of building muscle, with the goal of getting stronger, we are training as hard as we can with control, and we're training with the intention of getting better. Once we hit this plateau, this little wall here where we can't do any better, the solution is never, ever, ever more training. You never train more to get over a plateau. You actually train less. So what does that look like? What are the actual things that you have to do? Well, I'll start by defining a plateau, because if we're trying to get over it, we should at least know what it means. So I define a plateau officially by doing the same reps, the same weight, or less reps or less weight. And so the thing with this is that it can be interchangeable. So you can do same reps with less weight, you can do same reps with same weight, less reps with the same weight, or less reps with less weight. And so you can interchange pretty much all of these together. That part doesn't really matter. The part that does matter is that we're not getting stronger. We're not improving, we're not getting better. Because if we were getting stronger, then the size, the muscle mass that we're trying to gain will come after that. Strength always precedes size. And so you'll never gain muscle faster than you'll get stronger. You'll always get stronger first. But if we're not getting stronger, likelihood is we're not building that much muscle. And so there's not a one-to-one correlation between strength and size. There are strong guys who are really small, and there are jacked guys who are really weak. There are anomalies that exist. But for the most part, if you're stronger than the average dude, you're probably more muscular. We know what a plateau is, the same reps, same weight, less reps or less weight. How do we get over it? Now, the plateau that I'm referring to is the one you'd experience in the gym, getting weaker or doing the same reps with the same weight. But that doesn't mean that it's immediately solved with the gym. First, I'd look at the diet. How much food are you taking in? If you're consistently losing weight, if you're on a cut or a weight loss journey, chances are you're going to get a little bit weaker for the most part. This is a given because your body has less fuel to devote to strength, right? Because your body's trying to keep you alive. And so this would be the first thing I'd check out. How much food are you eating? Are you eating enough protein? The next thing is your sleep. Are you getting to bed at a decent hour every night? Are you getting between 7 and 9 hours of sleep most nights out of the week? If your sleep is garbage, if you're going to bed at 11 p.m. one night and then 3 a.m. the next night, and you're waking up at 6 a.m., not ideal, right? This is a pretty wacky schedule. So you want to be going to bed relatively at the same time, typically an hour and a half apart max. And you want to have high quality sleep, longer sleep. I have videos about that on the channel, so I won't go too deep there. But check your sleep. The third thing I check before your training is your stress levels. And I don't mean stress in the gym, like how much tension you're putting on the muscle. I'm talking about stress in life. Like, how's your job? How are your relationships? How is your relationship with your family? How is your stress with everything else going on? If you feel like the world is coming down on you, then chances are your lifts are also going to come down. Now, the workout's probably one of the least important things in your life right now. You're probably worrying about paying bills, probably worried about your family, your friends, etc. There's other things that matter more than the gym. But if these things are putting so much pressure on your shoulders to the point where you feel like you can't even breathe, then chances are you're gonna get weaker. And there's a bunch of different reasons why this happens. You could just have less energy to devote to the gym, or your cortisol can be so high. Cortisol breaks down muscle tissue. And so there's a bunch of reasons why you get weaker. But the point is, I would check these things before completely changing your training plan and doing like a bunch of random adjustments. Because the reality is, I'll draw it out live here. If you're trying to make a change, so let's just say you have a problem, right? The problem is our plateau. And you have a bunch of different solutions you can take, a bunch of different routes. Let's just say you have 5. You have 5 different options that could potentially solve this problem. If you do all 5 at once and it works, you have no idea which one did the job, or at least did the majority of the work to get this success. And so, in my opinion, it's better to change one at a time. And if that doesn't work, try the next one. If that doesn't work, try the next one. And if you're doing all the right things and you make all these improvements, then you know that either it's something that's completely different or you need to do more of the ones you're already doing, which is a possibility. But at least you have a better idea as to what to do to solve problems. And this applies to anything in life. That's why I'm a huge advocate of not immediately changing the stuff you do in the gym if it's a gym problem. If it's a diet problem, it's most likely solved with the diet. If it's a sleep problem, likely solved with sleep. But if it's a gym, if it's a training problem, I would check these things first. So let's just say you check all these and you're in the clear. You seem to be doing most things. You don't have to be perfect, but you're doing most of the things right. What do we do now? So now this is where I transition to the gym stuff. The first thing I do is if you're experiencing the plateau with the same weight, the same reps, or less weight, less reps, I would do this. And this seems pretty extreme. Take 7 days off the gym. Take a full week off the gym. I don't even want to see you at the gym. If I see you at the gym, you and I are going to have some problems. So take 7 days off the gym, zero training whatsoever, zero. Don't even show up. But you still have to eat your meals and sleep. So you still have to do the diet and the recovery side of things. You're just not training. So now you wait 7 days, you don't work out for a full week. Now you come back to the gym. Do you go right back into your regular routine? I personally don't recommend it. What I actually do is I do half of the frequency. Frequency is the amount of occurrences that happen in a specific period of time. If we're talking about the gym, it is how many times you are training throughout a time period. Most people make their training splits on a 1 week basis. So you are training half the amount that you usually would in a week. Now that doesn't mean you cut your sets in half, your weight in half, your intensity in half. All that stuff stays the same. All you're doing is if you're training 6 days a week, you're now going 3. If you train 4 days a week, you're going 2. If you're training 5 days a week, you can't do 2.5 days, so go 2. The amount of days that you're training gets cut in half. And you're not going to train at half frequency forever. You're only going to do it for another 7 days. And so this is a 14-day process. So it takes a pretty long time to get over a plateau, but if you want to do it right, good things take time. So take a full week off the gym, then come back at half the frequency for another 7 days. Once those 14 days are over, what I want you to do is check your plateau. Now, if you want to be 100% accurate and you don't want to miss, you don't want to mess up, I suggest that you track your lifts. I'm a huge proponent of keeping track of the metrics. One of them is tracking your workouts, seeing how many reps you're getting, how much weight you're lifting, how many sets you're doing. And so if you're tracking your lifts, you can go back to the workouts that you did in this half frequency week, and you can see, am I lifting more weight for more reps? Am I getting weaker? Am I getting stronger, right? These are questions you can ask yourself. If you're doing better than you were before the plateau, you're in the clear. If you're still doing the same or you're even worse than before, then I suggest taking another week off or another week at half frequency. My first choice personally would be to do this because you just took a week off, but you could also do this. This works too. I would personally pick this as my first choice between the two. So check your lifts when you hit your plateau, when you were experiencing the same reps, the same weight, less reps, less weight, and then compare it to now. Did you get stronger? Yes. Okay. Now you're in the clear. You can go back to full bore training. That is personally how I get over it. Now that is kind of the more extreme way to go about it. But what if it's not every single lift that you're doing? What if it's just one exercise that you've plateaued on? How do you get over that? So what I just showed you is if you're experiencing weakness and stagnation across all your lifts. But what happens when we just have one exercise that's not going good? There's a few things you can do here. So let's just say the exercise that's bothering you is tricep pushdowns. You're getting the same weight, the same reps, maybe less weight, maybe less reps, but it's only on this exercise. There's a few things we can do to solve this. First, I would look at where in your workout are you doing this exercise? Now, when I say where in the workout, I mean, are you doing it first? Is it happening in the middle? Is it happening last? Where is it happening in your workout? If tricep pushdowns are the first exercise you're doing and you're still getting the same reps, you're getting weaker, then we can transition to the next solution, which I would ask you, how's your form? So if I'm doing tricep pushdown, you can't really see my arms when they go below here, but if I'm pushing down, I get a full extension and I'm rising up and my shoulders are shrugging and then I'm pushing down using momentum, my triceps aren't doing much work there. And so they're not really incentivized to grow, because if we're not training to failure, right? If you've seen some of my other videos, you know that intensity is a really big part of training. In fact, it's the biggest part of training. If you're not training remotely close to failure, and by failure, I mean we're pushing our triceps to failure, not our shoulders, not our traps, not our butt. If we're doing tricep pushdowns, this is a tricep exercise. I'm not using my shoulders, shrugging them up, and then launching them down. We're pushing with our triceps, right? My shoulders are not depressed. They're not elevated. I'm not shrugging them up. I'm using my triceps. And so this applies to every exercise. If your form is garbage and you're not targeting that muscle and you're not taking that muscle to failure, you might be training to failure in the sense that you can't do any more reps. But what's failing? Is it your triceps or is it something else? And so if your abs are on fire, but not your triceps, that's a problem, right? We have to fix this. So if you're not training to failure, then you're going to stay at the same weight, the same reps, because that muscle is never incentivized to push harder because you're not pushing it hard. So I would ask about form. That'd be the second thing I'd look at. First would be wear. If you're doing tricep pushdowns dead last, then yeah, you might be pretty weak on those exercises. And if that's an exercise you're trying to improve, maybe bring it to the top. And by your form, I don't just mean limiting momentum or increasing range of motion or lifting with control and pushing with intensity. I'm not just talking about that. It could also mean the weight you're using. It's happened to me many times, especially on this exercise. That's why I use it as an example, is because sometimes I start getting pretty strong. Now, every workout, I get stronger by 1 rep, or I start adding weight to the bar once I'm out of my rep range. But if I'm lifting so much weight to where my other body parts are taking over, my shoulders, my abs, my glutes, etc., and my triceps aren't doing the work, again, not incentivized to grow. But sometimes you just get so strong that you run into this problem anyways. And so if you're doing tricep pushdowns with 80 pounds and you know that you can push those sets to failure and you can control it and you can really feel it in your triceps, doing tricep pushdowns with 100 pounds isn't useful if you're doing it well with 80. And so I want you to know that the weight on the bar is a good reflection. It's a good indication that you're making good progress, but it's not everything. People can lift heavy weight and not build any muscle. This is true. So if you can do tricep pushdowns with 80 pounds, don't jump to 100 just because you can do 100, because most times your form is going to suffer. We're not training to get a specific amount of reps. We're training to make each rep as good as possible. You want to train each rep with a huge focus on making that rep as hard as you can. We don't want to hit rep PRs. We don't want to go from 8 to 9 reps if our 9th rep was absolute garbage. We want to make sure that each rep is high quality. So check where your exercise is in your workout, then check your form. If these things are dialed in, then that's when I suggest making the switch. Remember earlier, like I said, we want to adjust for one solution at a time. Don't do all 5 at once. Fix one at a time. Now we switch. So what do we switch? We can switch the weight. We can switch the amount of reps we're doing. Typically, this strategy works better for more isolation exercises. It doesn't work as well for a bench press, a squat, a deadlift, because those are exercises that need a lot more muscle groups. But if it's just tricep pushdowns, then you know your triceps are the problem, not anything else. But if you're ready to make the switch, like I said, you might have to lower the weight. If you can do 80 pounds, and train that to failure for 10 to 12 reps, you're really pushing it, you can really feel your triceps. What is the point of going up to 100 pounds? What is the goal? To look more impressive to other people? I don't think that's a good goal. And so if you're doing 100 pounds now and you can still get 10 to 12 reps, but those reps aren't as high quality as these ones, then this is not the right play. And the cool thing about lifting like this, lifting with intensity and actually controlling the weight, is that eventually, if you give yourself, not even years, if you give yourself a few months, eventually you will be lifting those 100s for those 10 to 12 reps with the same control, and then you'll just keep progressing because the muscle's being trained to failure. So you'll move to 105, 110, 120. You'll keep going up and up and up, while the guy who's trying to look impressive at 100 pounds with 10 crappy reps is always going to stay there. In fact, he might actually get injured and get worse at lifting because he was lifting like a doofus. So lift hard, lift with control. That's when I suggest dropping weight. I do this all the time. I'll get to like 97.5 pounds on my tricep pushdowns, and then I will drop it to 82 or 87.5 so that I can continue feeling the muscle. My intensity is still sky high. I'm still training to failure. I'm still pushing as hard as I possibly can, but I want to make sure that my triceps are doing the work. And if that means using less weight, so be it. We're in this game to make progress, not to look impressive to other people. The last thing that I check is your reps. So if you're doing those 10 to 12 reps, sometimes your body is just exhausted, and it can be exhausted because it has low energy, or it can be exhausted of repetition of the same rep ranges over and over and over again. And so maybe you can switch from 10 to 12 to 12 to 15. And this will mean using a lighter weight. So you might have to go from 80 to 70. Very possible, right? This is a pretty easy switch, but it's the last thing I do because there's so many other things that matter more than this. And so I'd focus on where your exercise is in the program, how your form is. Then if you want to make the switch, change the weight, and then change your reps. I know that was a lot of information, so I will sum it up. To sum up what you do if you had a plateau with one exercise, I would start with where it is in your workout. So check where it is from the start to the middle to the end. If it's at the end of your workout, try to bring it to the start because you'll probably be stronger there. The next thing to check is your form. More specifically, are you using too much momentum? Are your shoulders activating, or are they super tense when you're doing a tricep pushdown? Are your abs cramping up? Is there other muscles that are involved that shouldn't be involved in that exercise? Are you dropping the weight? If you're doing curls, are you curling the weight up and letting it down with control? Or are you curling it and just dropping it on the ground, right? We have to train the muscle harder. And it is more difficult. It's more challenging to do less momentum, but that's a good thing because we want our exercise to be harder. The next thing I check in your form is if you're doing enough range of motion. So if you're doing a bench press, let's just say, and you're pressing the weight up, and then you're bringing it down, you stop right here and you're pressing like this. Again, the chest isn't really working that hard when I'm pressing like this. I got to come all the way down, stretch that chest out, and then press. We want to make sure that the muscle is being worked to its maximum ability. If it's not being worked to the max, then that ceiling that you're trying to approach is never incentivized to grow, and neither are you. If you've checked these two things and you're in the clear, you're not perfect, but you're doing most of these things right, then look to make the switch. Maybe you're lifting too much weight. Drop the weight a little bit. Or you can change the rep range. Maybe you're doing 8 to 12 reps and you've been doing 8 to 12 reps for the past year. Maybe you can change it from 8 to 12 to 12 to 15, right? You can make this switch. And so that might be a reason. And if you've done all of this and you can check off each one on the list and say confidently that, yes, I have done all of these things to the best of my ability, then maybe change the exercise to something new. So if you're doing tricep pushdowns, maybe do a tricep extension or an overhead extension or a close grip bench press. There's always changes that you can make. But this is exactly how I solve plateaus on one exercise. And for me, this has worked every time. I've never missed with this. So if you want to give it a try, it's right there. But if you're experiencing a plateau with a lot of things, maybe you're experiencing plateau with 5 of your exercises. It could be a plateau with everything. So here's what I do. So if you've ran into a plateau in almost every exercise or a lot of the exercises you're doing, it's probably a good sign that your body's exhausted of training. And so you don't solve this ever with more training. What I've done every single time, and it's never missed, is that I take 7 days off the gym, but I still eat and I still get to bed on time. So these things are still done no matter what. Then when those 7 days are up, they're over, the next 7 days you are training at half the frequency. So 6 days turns to 3, 4 days turns to 2, and so on. The intensity, the sets, the weight, everything else stays the same except the days that you're training a week. Then when those 7 days are up, ask yourself, am I stronger than I was before my plateau? This is why I'm big on tracking lifts, because you can see actually, are you stronger, yes or no? That way you don't have to guess. But let's just say you're not tracking your lifts. Am I stronger for the most part than I was before everything went to crap? And so if you can answer that question with a yes, then you are good to go back to full training. Train 6 days a week, train 5, go back to your regular stuff. But if you answer no, then I would take another week at half the frequency. And so I do this for another week. Give your body some rest. For the most part, a lot of training problems can be solved with rest and good food. A lot of food problems are solved with food. A lot of rest problems are solved with rest. But this can often be solved by doing this and this better. So guys, I hope this video helped you out. My name's George Tressiter, and I founded this company, The Incredible Bulk, because I'm sick of having no help for the skinny guys, because I was a very skinny guy growing up, and I know what it feels like to be the skinniest guy in the group and want to change but have no way to know how. Hopefully this solved that problem for you. So this is how I solve plateaus personally, with one exercise or with everything in my workouts, in my training. And yeah, I got nothing else to say, so talk soon.